This is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite and Eric Severide in Washington, David Shoemaker in Salt Lake City, Utah, Nelson Benton in Chicago, Terry Drinkwater in Everett, Washington, Ike Pappas in Memphis, Don Webster aboard the USS New Jersey in the Gulf of Tonkin, and Hal Walker in Washington.
Good evening. Vice President Humphrey, who has been running third in electoral votes in the presidential race, has lost even more ground in the last week, according to a CBS News survey. And George Wallace has gained. The state-by-state survey shows Richard Nixon still comfortably out front with more electoral votes than needed to win if the election were held today. But since last week, even Nixon's total has declined by 1 state and 9 electoral votes. Humphrey has declined by 2 states and 14 electoral votes, and Wallace has increased by 3 states and 27 electoral votes. The shifting of voter sentiment also results in 11 states with 126 votes being rated as toss-ups. In Salt Lake City today, Humphrey acknowledged his standing. He told Utah Democrats, in his words, if the election were held today, we wouldn't have a prayer.
I've been reading about Humphrey's the underdog. You know, you got to get pretty low to be the underdog in this campaign, but I guess I am. So I accept the verdict of the pundits. They know. And may I say that sometimes they help make it so.
It was an embattled candidate who talked to a breakfast meeting of Utah Democrats, not only the press, which Humphrey claims magnifies his problems, but the demonstrators, and now a Republican truth squad has popped up.
I'm out here trying to carry this campaign as a sort of a lonesome ranger all by myself. Well, I want to tell you that the bandits are descending on the village. And the lonesome ranger isn't enough. And the lone ranger isn't enough. Somebody better get out and help. We better start manning the barricades before it's too loose and before it's too late. When I saw the announcement the Republican Truth Squad was in town, I was so, just so excited that any Republican would show up. And for a moment I thought possibly they brought the Republican nominee for president and vice president, and I knew they couldn't because it was the Truth Squad. I said, there they are.
The Republican Truth Squad, which will be following Humphrey from now on, includes 3 congressmen and a governor. For starters, Pennsylvania's Hugh Scott jabbed Humphrey on the problem he's been having with hecklers.
On the matter of heckling, it follows that a candidate who can't hold a meeting together is having a great deal of difficulty persuading the people that he can hold a nation together.
The demonstrators, although they are the small minority Humphrey claims, are constantly on his mind. Even in the Mormon tabernacle, with the nearest heckler hundreds of miles away, he could not forget them.
Now my ears echo with the voices of dissent. Yet I stand before you to affirm this above all. I believe in the right to be different, the right of dissent. Not for some, but for everyone. America, in a sense, is built on dissent, as the settlers of this valley surely know. Dissent is the dynamo of democracy, in Utah as in all America. When the people of a nation can move their heads in one direction only, up and down, they must soon bow them down forever.
Humphrey can handle the Truth Squad, Nixon, and the press. He has not, however, figured out how to handle the demonstrators. When the hecklers wish, they can dominate his campaign appearances, and that frustrates and angers Humphrey and his staff. To that extent, at least, the hecklers have the upper hand. David Shoemaker, CBS News, Salt Lake City.
Richard Nixon, who has drawn criticism for membership in a golf club which allegedly discriminates against Negroes and Jews, has resigned from that and several other clubs. A Nixon aide said today that on the day after his nomination, the Republican candidate notified the Baldwin Golf Club in Springfield, New Jersey, of his resignation. His letter said he believed it appropriate to drop his membership from organizations not related to his commitment as a candidate.
Herman, wake up, Herman. Dinner, Herman. But will Herman get the meat he needs? Most dog foods are mainly cereal, not Alpo. Alpo is 100% meat. Here's Alpo beef, radiant broiled in its natural juices. Then there's Alpo chicken, horse meat, liver, lamb, veal. All are 100% meat, no cereal. With Alpo, you know. fried chicken. Aw, here's a sad situation. Dogs love chicken too, but the remains of the family chicken with its sharp bones. But wait, Alpo's got the answer. Delicious Alpo chicken for your dog. Nourishing, high-energy chicken, radiant broiled in its natural juices. Alpo 100% chicken, no cereal. Makes dinner a real picnic for your dog.
George Wallace has proposed industrialization of rural areas to help the cities solve their job and housing problems. With a week's rest and a new campaign plane, Wallace set out today to win some of the city votes. Nelson Benton reports.
Putting aside his vintage DC-7, George Wallace boarded a newly chartered turboprop to head where the votes are, to the industrial centers of the Midwest and the East. He took aim first on Chicago and Cicero, and he took aim on Republican candidate Richard Nixon.
We're going to tell the people of Cicero about what we've told the people all over the country. You know, we don't make one speech in Anaheim, California, and then make a different one in North Carolina like Mr. Nixon does, come out for open housing in Washington, then go to Miami and secretly tell the delegates of the South that he's sorry that he was for such a bill. Is that we're going to say the same thing in Cicero that we said in Miami. We're going to say the same thing in Cicero that we said in Long Beach, and the same thing we say in Alabama.
His motorcade through Chicago's loop was impressive, with his crowds neither as loud nor as large as those who turned out for Nixon. But the third-party candidate's route was shorter in both distance and time. Like most such events, it was timed for the lunch hour on State Street, and traveled the 8-block distance in a matter of 20 minutes. His supporters in a bugle corps thronged along the route. The curious and the enthusiastic clustered along the way, and the dissidents made their presence known. Some threw confetti, one threw an egg. A security man fielded it with finesse.
All right, he's gone by now, man. What do you think of George Wallace?
I don't think nothing of him. 100%. I come from East Scary over here to see him. And I think he's it. I think he's probably me.
He's what, lady? What is he?
He's a winner, that's what. He's a winner.
He'll win. Yes,
a winner.
One of the great questions of the Wallace campaign has been what sort of impression he can make in the industrial centers of the North. A parade down State Street at noon is no barometer for an entire campaign, but it's safe to say that George Wallace has made an impression. Nelson Denton, CBS News, Chicago.
An uneasy settlement of New York City's teachers' strike over the weekend sent more than 1 million school children back to classes today. However, there was no indication that the main issues of local school control and teachers' job security have been resolved. The local school board at the center of the dispute has called the settlement unacceptable, although it's unclear what the board might do. The International Longshoremen's Association is set to strike ports from Maine to Mexico tonight. Contract talks broke off today in New York, but the government is expected to seek a Taft-Hartley injunction to keep the dock workers on the job. The union seeks more guaranteed work each year and increased wages and fringe benefits.
Oh, I can't wait to see how my slides of Shirley came out. I hope the others came out better. Oh, the bullfight's next. The action. It didn't come out either. Oh, but now my son set the colors. Oh, no. Those colors are all
He should have used the film in the red box. With GAF Anscochrome, you don't have to explain or make excuses for what you show. With Anscochrome films, your color slides speak for themselves.
These are Ruberoid vinyl floors. They look so beautiful because they look so real. They look so real because we make them a different way, with a process called gravure that reproduces a brick floor that looks like brick, a flagstone floor that looks like flagstone. In fact, we could make an authentic-looking vinyl floor out of anything that can be photographed. Anything.
GAF Ruberoid, the very authentic vinyl floors.
The people at GAF make building supplies, cameras, film, copying machines, chemicals, and a lot more.
30 miles north of Seattle, Washington, the airplane of the future, the biggest commercial jetliner in the world, was shown to the public today. CBS News correspondent Terry Drinkwater reports.
She was rolled slowly off the production line out of the hangar. The 747, half again as long as the jets now in service and twice as wide, as tall as a 5-story building. But the staggering fact about the 747 is the number of passengers she'll be able to carry, 490. And that's more than 3 times as many as the jets now used by the airlines. She's the biggest airliner ever built for commercial service. At the ceremonies today, no one ever mentioned the word, but this is the first of the Airbuses. She has just 4 engines, but each is twice as powerful as today's jets. The inside isn't finished, but a mock-up shows what it will look like. 2 wide aisles and bigger seats, even in coach. Boeing is pushing luxury and selling planes. So far, 158 of them. The first will begin carrying passengers just 15 months from now. Some models will have a few private cabins with beds for first-class passengers who pay extra. They're upstairs. Yes, part of the 747 is 2 stories high. When these planes go into service, for passengers, the flight itself will seem easy, but airport congestion will be mammoth. 490 people and their friends and relatives who come to see them off arriving together at airports that aren't big enough. The christening, stewardesses with 26 bottles of champagne.
With all the passenger congestion she can create on the ground, when the 747 begins serving America's cities, she may well become known as the Trojan horse of the jet age. Terry Drinkwater, CBS News, Everett, Washington.
The judge in the James Earl Ray case today found 4 persons in contempt, including the defendant's attorney, on charges of violating court rules on pretrial publicity. However, he deferred sentencing. Ray himself, accused in the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King, made a court appearance today, and Ike Pappas reports from Memphis.
The defendant, James Earl Ray, looked pale, no doubt because of his many months in jail, but he appeared neat in a blue suit and a white shirt. He was heavily guarded by a team of uniformed sheriff's police and plainclothesmen as he sat quietly, for the most part, in his chair behind his attorney Arthur Haynes of Birmingham, Alabama. Only occasionally did he fidget as he listened to witnesses describe the elaborate electronic watch that he is under 24 hours a day. Attorney Haynes had asked Judge W. Preston Battle to remove the closed-circuit television hookup that monitors Ray's every move because, according to the attorney, Ray is becoming increasingly nervous and his health might be affected because of the constant television watch. But at the end of it, Judge Battle refused Mr. Haynes' motions and the television watch was ordered not to be removed. Security for this second appearance for Ray was even far more stringent than it was the first time. Only 28 spectators were allowed to watch the proceedings. They were mostly newsmen and women who were first searched and then asked to go themselves before a closed-circuit television camera there to state their names and their titles and their addresses. Once during the testimony, the proceedings came to a dead halt when the lights in the courthouse flickered for just a moment, and then they went out for just a split second. But in that time, sheriff's police had already started to their feet. It was, however, just a temporary power failure. Ike Pappas, CBS News, Memphis, Tennessee.
In Washington today, President Johnson and former Defense Secretary Robert McNamara each spoke of the need for family planning in the world's underdeveloped nations. Their remarks came in speeches before a joint meeting of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Neither man took issue directly with Pope Paul's ruling against artificial birth control methods, but McNamara, now head of the World Bank, proposed increased international loan programs with new emphasis on population control. Prices moved higher today on the New York Stock Exchange. The volume was some 13,600,000 shares. The exchange index gained 21 cents.
We're thinking about introducing Benson & Hedges 100s around the world. After all, we've had the disadvantages to ourselves long enough. Cigarette that made Extra Puffs popular in America make Extra Puffs popular around the world?
This fine razor isn't made by Persona. It's made by a competitor. But to get the best shave with it, use the new electro-coated Persona blade. Maybe someday we'll make the best razor. But for now, we'll settle for the best blade, the electro-coated Persona.
The 56,000-ton battleship New Jersey joined the Vietnam War today. From her station in Tonkin Gulf, she fired round after round from her 16-inch guns into enemy targets inside the demilitarized zone 12 miles away. Spotter pilots said the barrage wiped out 4 automatic weapons positions and 1 artillery emplacement. We got a look at the big ship in this report from CBS News correspondent Don Webster.
One of the important factors in the entry of the New Jersey into the Vietnam War is what Hanoi's reaction will be. The U.S. hopes that North Vietnam will consider the New Jersey just another weapon, despite the fact we've added to the war the only battleship afloat in the world. The decision to reactivate the New Jersey was made in August of last year, well before the Paris peace talks, the partial bombing halt, or before anyone had any idea who would be running for president. As a result of the bombing halt, the New Jersey will confine its shelling to south of the 19th parallel, the same as our aircraft. The New Jersey is operating in the Gulf of Tonkin with only 1,600 men. In World War II, it had 3,200. The skipper of the New Jersey, Captain J. Edward Snyder. How are you able to fight in the Vietnam War with only half as many men as you had in World War II?
Well, primarily is because the New Jersey was put into commission this time for a single purpose, to provide field artillery support afloat to the forces in Southeast Asia. We no longer have the problem of having to slug it out with another battleship. There are no other battleships in the world. We've been able to remove all of our machine guns because the machine guns in 1943 are not effective against today's aircraft. This saved 450 people, for example.
The important thing about the New Jersey is its guns. They are 16 inches, twice as large as any others now in service. A single shell for these guns weighs 2,700 pounds, 10 times as much as any other. Their range is 23 miles, and they strike with the force of a 2,000-pound bomb. These are pictures of a recent practice firing. What sort of targets will it be hitting?
Well, she will hit, of course, the deepest targets that we have available here. That's one of the restrictions which we place, or it is placed on the 8-inch cruiser, in that they have a limited range which the New Jersey exceeds. So the targets available to New Jersey will be those that we haven't been, to date, able to hit with the 8-inch cruiser.
To many seamen on board a Navy ship, life is pretty much the same, whether you're 100 miles off Brooklyn Navy Yard or 100 miles off Haiphong. The New Jersey's executive officer, Commander James L. Felt. How are the living conditions aboard the New Jersey for the men?
Well, I think they're very adequate. We don't have all the advantages of ships built more recently. But on the other hand, we've got half the people living now that lived here during World War II. During the activation, many improvements were put in to make the ship as habitable as possible. For example, down on our mess decks, we've got the 4-man mess tables now, as opposed to the long tables and benches that were there earlier. Most of the living spaces are air-conditioned. Many of the offices and shops are air-conditioned. I think we do certainly as well as the average ship in the Navy.
It wasn't long ago that the battleship had been written off as the dinosaur of the Navy fleet, proving how wrong even the experts can be at predicting the use of conventional weapons in this nuclear age. Don Webster, CBS News, in the Gulf of Tonkin, off the demilitarized zone.
In ground action, communist troops kept up their shelling of a U.S. Special Forces camp southwest of Da Nang that has been under attack for 3 days now. UPI reports that the North Vietnamese units turned back an Allied relief force trying to reach the outpost. A North Vietnamese flag was raised over one of several nearby villages that were captured during the day. The camp itself has withstood 3 enemy assaults. U.S. military sources in Saigon said today that 6 Negro soldiers involved in a riot at the Long Binh stockade will be tried for murder or conspiracy to commit murder. The charges stem from the slaying of a white soldier at the prison last month. He was beaten to death with a shovel. In New York today, Secretary of State Rusk met for more than an hour with UN Secretary General Thant and had what Rusk called a lively and friendly exchange on Vietnam and other issues. Rusk would not comment specifically on Thant's repeated calls for a complete halt in the bombing of North Vietnam. Informants said, however, that Russ takes the position that such appeals only complicate the preliminary Vietnam talks in Paris. Red China has begun celebrations marking its 19th anniversary. At a Peking reception, Premier Zhou Enlai glossed over China's internal problems and claimed that Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution is not far away from complete victory. He also charged that Soviet troops have massed in Bulgaria to threaten Albania, China's European ally. It was disclosed in Moscow today that a grandson of former Soviet Foreign Minister Maxim Litvinov has been arrested for protesting the invasion of Czechoslovakia. Informants said that 28-year-old Pavel Litvinov was among 7 demonstrators picked up in Moscow's Red Square last month. He'll be tried on charges of disturbing the peace, and he could get up to 3 years in jail.
Red, I've lost my head about red. So bold, bright, red, you get when you use bold. Bold brightens red with a colorful shower of blue, white, and green, brightening power. Red. I mean exactly what I said. Red, if you like red, you'll love bright red bold. It's bold and so red.
I'm 33, and these are supposed to help me pass as a 19-year-old. This should help, but my hands will have to make it on their own.
But she uses the creamiest, mildest ivory liquid ever. It even whips. That's creaminess you can see and feel. It leaves hands with that creamy young look. Mrs. Astor fooled the kids at a teenage gathering, and her hands didn't give her away. Ivory liquid leaves hands with that creamy young look.
The House Ethics Committee will meet tomorrow to look into reports of phantom voting on roll call ballots in the House. The inquiry results from reports that some congressmen have been recorded as voting at times when they actually weren't even in Washington. The reports, however, do not indicate that the practice has been widespread or that it has changed the outcome on any key legislation. One House clerk has been suspended pending the investigation. As the Senate apparently prepared to do to him what it has done to only one man in the nation's history, reject his nomination as Chief Justice. Abe Fortas took part in a Washington ceremony on the eve of the showdown vote, and Hal Walker reports.
Associate Justice Fortas gave his full attention to a local ceremonial duty today as the Senate prepared for the big test vote over his nomination. The occasion was the topping off ceremony for the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, and Mr. Fortas, a trustee of the center, administered the oath to 4 new trustees, including Senator Edward M. Kennedy, one of those backing the Fortas nomination. Both the justice and the senator seemed lost in their own thoughts today as the ceremony progressed, and as the symbolic Greek masks of comedy and tragedy were hoisted to the top of the $58 million Arts Center. Mr. Fortas refused to discuss his nomination or the current Senate filibuster with reporters. His only comments were on the need to meet a 25% undersubscription for the JFK Center. Hal Walker, CBS News, Washington.
While the Fortas filibuster continued on the floor, a Senate committee began a hearing on another administration appointment. And there, Foreign Relations Chairman Fulbright asked Washington Post editor J. Russell Wiggins for his feelings on nomination as ambassador to the United Nations.
Why are you interested in this appointment? I wondered what you...
Senator, what I am about to say may sound to a cynical and somewhat skeptical world differently than I intend it to sound, but I am interested in it for only one reason. I am in love.
What?
I am in love. I am in love with the United States. I am in love with its history, which I have read daily for 50 years and studied its pages as some men study a breviary or a Bible or a Koran or the Torah. I am in love with its institutions upon which I believe the freedom and liberty of mankind in this world may chiefly depend. I am in love with the people of this country whose good intentions I believe in with all my heart, and whose spirit, I think, rises on every occasion that it's summoned to serve the good interests of the world. I'm in love with this land, with every corner of it that I've visited, and every section of it has filled me with inspiration and wonder and amazement at the progress that a small people have made here on this continent. I believe in the future of my country. I think I can serve this country in this capacity and lend to it something of the common touch. I believe that the President's confidence in me is not entirely misguided, and I hope to be able to vindicate and to confirm the possession of that love by my conduct in the office to which he has asked me to serve.
Washington. On the assumption that nice guys occasionally finish first, it's reasonable to expect the Senate to approve Mr. J. Russell Wiggins as our newest ambassador to the United Nations. By the normal rules of the game, any newspaper editor who charms politicians ought to be suspect. But so far, Mr. Wiggins' reputation as a gentleman seems to be an asset in this often ungentlemanly town. Mr. Wiggins is nearly 65 years old and therefore possesses the prerogative that the late Elmer Davis prized so much, the freedom to say exactly what one thinks without fear of the future. A good many men use the prerogative to tell off their enemies. Today, Mr. Wiggins, in his testimony, used it to express his love. He just blurted it out like a moonstruck swain. He loves this country, he said, the good intentions of its people, its history, and its institutions, on which, he said, the liberty of mankind may chiefly depend. A Senate committee hears about many things: hatred, suspicion, calculation, strategies. But love, pure and unadulterated, this can produce a toxic effect in political nervous systems if taken without a chaser. And, of course, to people like the youthful New Left, a confession of love of one's country is corny and square. They haven't yet understood that it's the squares who make life possible for everybody else, that nationality is a basic part of personality, and that anyone who doesn't love his country is probably a little bit sick. Mr. Wiggins will presumably go to the United Nations, and then it will be interesting to see how a square makes out dealing with a bent world. Normally, we'd say writers and editors and such like are temperamentally unfit for public office. For one thing, they have the habit of trying to look at all sides of every question. For another, they are accustomed to the privilege of making bad mistakes in the judgment of public issues without causing half so much general damage as a bad mistake by public officials. Particularly since the Kennedy years, there's been a tradition of men moving from journalism to public office to teaching and back and around. It's a dubious business and suggests at least a tinge of dilettantism. But these have been nearly all young men on the make. Mr. Wiggins, however, has now reached the age for Social Security and doesn't expect to return to his lifelong trade. And if he prefers to end his active years in the wild insecurity of the UN job, to begin as a diplomat at the age most diplomats are retired, well, this is a year of surprises anyway. Walter?
And that's the way it is. Monday, September 30th, 1968. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.
Smashing up your car on a trip is bad enough, but getting it fixed in a strange place where you deal with strangers can make you a nervous wreck. We at Continental Insurance know how alone you can feel then. That's why we fixed it so our policyholders can always reach us when they need help. Continental agents give policyholders an emergency kit. It has an emergency telephone number, an emergency dime, and 2 emergency aspirins. So why be alone?
Direct from our newsroom in New York, in color, this has been the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.